Good evening, everyone. If I could call the meeting to order and ask you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everyone. Someone carry the roll, please. Call the roll. Renee, please.
Good
answer
evening.
Here
Renee
or present.
Medina,
So
for the record. Karen Andrus.
Here.
Carl Baracco.
Here.
Derek Botana. Absent. Joseph Cruz.
Here.
Reggie Henderson.
Here.
Ron Inge.
Here.
Christy Knight is absent. Matt Lincolnhall.
Here.
John Paul is absent. Chris Robin.
Here.
Sawyer Smith is absent. Shane Spring.
Here.
Andrew Send.
Here.
Bridget Thoreau.
Here.
That's a quorum.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from our October 16th, 2024 meeting. They were in your package. Does anyone have any comments, or will entertain a motion for approval?
Motion approved.
Second. When we make motions, let's make sure we say our names so the clerk can get them. Mr. Spring made the motion, and Mr. Cruz seconded, as well as Mr. Sun, so take a pick. We have a motion and a second for approval of the October 16th minutes. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carries unanimously. Thank you guys very much. With the committee's indulgence, I would like to move item 6B, because of commitments that staff has right after this, to the next item so that we can hear a report on the history of the funding of the 2020 program. Does anyone on the committee have any objection to moving this item out of order and placing it on the agenda now? If so, please speak.
Is she going to Kenny G? Is that why she wants to get it?
I don't know that, but that's a very good question. Seeing none. Mr. Pete Winton, please. This is item 6B for the public. This is the funding of Conservation 2020 program, a brief explanation of how it's funded and what its history is, and some insight into that. This is a committee question by one of our members. Mr. Winton, please go forward.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks. My name is Pete Winton. I'm the CFO for the county. And I know that there's new members here, so there'd been a request to get some information about the funding of the program, the history and the current funding of the program. So that's what I'm here to talk about. Please interrupt me at any point if you have questions or any concerns about what I'm saying. Let me start out before I get into the history, just talk about where the program is today. As of today, the acquisition fund for Conservation 2020 has $38 million in it. And then also we provide through the general, and these are both the acquisition fund for the program as well as the management fund, which pays for the salaries of the folks that work on the 2020 properties, the equipment, and the contracts for exotic removal. That's all funded out of the general fund, and typically we transfer about $5 million a year from the general fund to the management fund to pay for its activities. Now, that doesn't mean they spend $5 million each year. Some years they may pay $7, some years they may spend $3. A lot of it has to do with just the timing of projects, the timing of management plans or whatever. And I know I had a conversation with Karen Andrus earlier this year, because for 24-25, we reduced that funding from $5 million to $3 million. That's not because we're not doing projects. It doesn't mean that we're putting any stops on any work. It's just because there was a significant amount of funding that had built up and was being carried over, and we didn't have to fund that amount for the current year, because this is part of the general fund, and there's a lot of agencies and a lot of departments in the general fund. The general fund's a huge fund. It's almost $700 million. Karen, go ahead.
Didn't we, weren't we supposed to not go below 40 million?
So the ordinance says that the acquisition fund should be between no lower than 40 million and no higher than 80 million. It doesn't say you can't go below 40 million, but after it goes below 40 million, you have to come up with a plan for replenishment, which we have done in the past. We've replenished. We haven't in recent years, but we have, and I'll get into that as we go along.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I said $38 million in the acquisition fund. The management fund is fully funded for the projects and the personnel and the equipment that they have to use. Then let me go back then a little bit of history of Conservation 2020. It was passed by referendum in 1997. That's a mosquito. There, I got it. In 1997, and it was funded through a $500,000 of tax rate. So every mill is $1 per $1,000 of taxable value, or $100 per 100,000. So that started in 07, 08. And that's the way it was funded. And I know Robert has these numbers, but over the years, I think we've spent north of $360 million on acquisition of properties, as well as management of the properties. So going forward, in 2012, we learned that. 2012, we were in the recession, and we learned that the only tax rate that you can charge on a tax bill that's county-wide is the general fund tax rate. That $700 million fund I'm talking about pays for the sheriff's office, pays for all the constitutionals, pays for regional parks, transit, public safety, EMS, a number of things. It's a huge fund, and it's the most discretionary of funds we have. So we found out that you can't charge, before then you had a Conservation 2020 tax rate of $500,000 on your tax bill. We learned that you can't do that. The only way you can do that is that the county can set up municipal service taxing units in the unincorporated area. So we could set up one for the unincorporated area and charge that, but we can't charge a countywide tax other than the general fund unless all of the cities opt in, or whatever cities opt in that want to. So at that point in 2012, we combined the Conservation 2020 millage with the general fund millage. At that point, the acquisition fund had accumulated $96 million of funding in it. And then going forward, the funding of both the acquisition fund and the management fund came out of the general fund. Now, that's not to say that we held whole that $500,000 in the general fund for Conservation 2020, because at the time it was the recession. The general fund was routinely experiencing deficits of $40 to $50 million a year because the tax base had dropped in half. So while while we have replenished the acquisition fund since then, since the $96 million, going forward, some of that was used for or a portion of it was used for operations in the general fund. Because at the time, we had to put ambulances out on the street, we had to pay for regional parks, we had to pay for transit, we had to pay for other things. In 2015, there was a referendum that was non-binding that asked voters if they agreed with continuing the Conservation 2020 program and paying for it out of the general fund, and it passed overwhelmingly. So going forward, at that time we had $96 million in the acquisition fund. Of course, the biggest purchase that we've done to date is Larry Kika Preserve. We purchased that, which took that $96 million down considerably. But then between 2019, 2020, and 2021, we replenished the fund from the general fund with $14.5 million of general funds. So after that, all of the purchases since then in the acquisition fund have gone forward with that initial fund and the replenishment, and then, as Karen, you said, we're at $38 million today in the acquisition fund. So that's just a brief history of the program funding. Does anybody have any questions?
What would a $500,000 be worth in today's budget, since the $500,000 originally was added on for 2020 and remained on once it was intermixed with the general?
Yeah, each tenth of a mil right now is $13 million, so it would be about $65 million.
Okay, $500,000, $65 million a year.
Any other questions of Mr. Winton?
When we bring it back to funding, is it gonna go right back to 40 million? Because say we buy these properties, are we gonna wait is it gonna go to the fiscal year, get it down to where it is, and then bring it back to 40? Or are you gonna put it to 50? How are you gonna replenish it? Because I don't remember the last time when we replenished it, what did we actually brought it back to when we did it?
Yeah, and I'm not sure what that is. The way we're approaching the replenishment is it's based on we have a forecast to spend rate for acquisitions and purchases, and so we've just tried to balance that with how much we need to replenish each year. I mean, I'll let you know the general fund's it's a very tight fund. It has a lot of wants and needs and competing interests, so that's a delicate balance each year. I don't think our expectation was, if it goes to 38, do you immediately replenish it? But I think there will be a discussion about, when and how long we want to take to replenish it, based on just what our capacity is in the general fund.
Thank you. Any further questions, Mr. Winton? All right, sir. Thank you very much for giving us that overview. Really appreciate that. It's a great historical perspective. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Pete.
All righty, well, we're going to go back to the agenda for the public's information. There are two opportunities to speak. One is on Section 5 acquisition review, and we'll ask the public to speak after or on each item before we take action. And the next is item 7, when general comments from the public are appropriate. When the public does speak, please keep in mind you're limited to 3 minutes, so we'd ask that you keep your remarks within that time frame. So back on the agenda, the first item, we have 2 acquisition review items. The first one is nomination 232-2 in the Crew Trust, 15.5 acres, a score of 79. Mr. Clemens.
Yes, this property is an infill property in the Crew boundaries, and staff recommends to proceed with acquisition activities on this.
All right, questions of Mr. Clemens?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Well, before you do, if I may, let's take public input. Sorry, Mr. Spring. If we could, would anyone in the public care to speak on nomination 232-2, 15.5 acres in the Crew Trust? If so, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, Mr. Spring, back to you.
Motion to approve acquisition of the Crew parcels.
I'll second.
What do you
Go
think?
ahead.
Virtual second.
So we have a motion on Mr. Spring, motion by Ms. Andrus and Ms. Theriot. Take a pick on that as well. Okay, we have a motion and a second to recommend that this be forwarded to acquisition review. Do we have any discussion or questions? Seeing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. That carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item, 5B, this is an item of which I have a possible conflict of interest. I've filed Form 8B with Renee. I will not participate in the discussion nor the vote on this item, and I'll turn over the chair of the meeting at this time to our vice chair, Mr. Baracco. Mr. Baracco.
You might turn it over to me. I need to make sure I don't have a conflict. I don't think I do, but the broker is a client. And I don't think that would be classified as a conflict, do you?
What? Explain, please. I'm sorry.
The broker presented for this item is a client of mine.
But you don't represent him on this?
No. I just wanted to be...
Yes. Okay. No, that is not a legal conflict.
Thank you. Okay. So we're clear to go ahead. Robert, would you go with the presentation?
Sure. This is about a 80-acre tract of land on Pine Island. As you see, it's in the Smokehouse Bay Preserve area. Staff recommends to go forward with this property for acquisition consideration, with terms and conditions of the acquisition being that the property owner remove the the exotic trees that are on it. This was a former, well, I guess it's still a palm tree grove. And similar to the one we approved about a year ago, we recently closed on Pine Island. We want those trees removed, the irrigation lines removed, the wells capped and or removed, and then the land backfilled from the trees removal and the fields leveled. And that was a condition on that last one that we did as well. So staff, under those conditions, staff recommends to go forward with the acquisition activities on this.
I just had some comments on it. It would be suitable for storm surge buffer for the Smokehouse Bay. And it would restore mangoes and mangroves, not mangoes, and native vegetation. It would reduce ag runoff into Matlacha Pass. And the site is adjacent to state and county lands. And it is in a high coastal hazard area and not suitable for residential development.
Any of those reasons are the reasons staff was recommending.
Okay, and there is, the Pine Island Civic Association is looking for a project to help with restoration. And that's a, you know, if you want to contact them, they're looking for something to help with.
Any other questions? Yes.
So, again, I'm looking at the satellite, Robert. It looks like there's a pond on the north piece that's a drainage pond or some kind of a pond that they dug to, I guess, to retain water, to hold water. I'm looking at.
I assume so. If there's a pond on it, that probably was for irrigation or
And it looks like
continuation
there's a
purposes.
pump house and stuff. Is that going to be
Yes.
removed as part of it?
All the infrastructure for the operation would need to be removed.
So, but is that, again, I'm asking this because of the other issue we had on Pine Island with arsenic problems and wells and all that stuff. Are we going to do it with, how environmental wise with that or anything we looking at?
We do phase one, and if it's required, phase two audits. Usually on these, we will do samples. If there is a water feature on the property, a man-made water feature, we will do sampling in there to make sure the stuff tends to collect. So the short answer is yes.
And that would be prior to closing?
Correct.
Those testing, okay.
Is the pond on the property or is it to the northeast?
It's hard to tell. These lines are very close proximity. I don't think that pond in the northeast is on the property, looking at the aerial we have here. But when we ground truth it, if it is going to be tested.
It almost looks like a ditch more than a pond. I mean, it's a long ditch. Again, I'm looking at just the most recent stuff.
I suspect there are irrigation ditches on this. You know, some of the pictures I saw, because there is rows cut for the trees.
Any other questions? Yes.
All the land to the north, is that all state lands? Or are they privately owned?
That I don't know for certain. You know, the dark green areas are county-owned properties. And it does appear that those areas adjacent and northeast of the subject are existing mangrove wetland habitats.
Any other committee questions? If there are no other, yes?
I'd like to make a motion to forward.
Let's hear from the public next, and then we'll come back. That's okay. So if there are no other committee questions, would anyone from the public like to speak? No one. Okay, so no public speakers. We'll come back to the committee, and I think we have someone who'd like to make a motion. Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to move this forward.
And that was from Karen.
And I think it's very
Second.
special we could get 80 acres out there.
And the second from Mr. Cruz. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously, and it's back to you.
Abstain.
Oh, for the record, Mr. Inge did not vote. He did abstain.
Thank you, Mr. Bracco. We'll go back to the agenda. Next item is item 6. We have a few items on here for informational purposes based on questions or comments from the committee. The first is a management update about a very nice grant. Mr. Adelini, could you please fill us in on what occurred and where we're at?
Certainly. while back ago, I think I even informed you about, we had applied for a Resilient Florida grant for the Kuiper Preserve project, primarily for the water management features, which would include perimeter berm structure and water control structures that control water to Halfway Creek, Halfway Creek, Estero River, and Imperial River. That's one of the design concepts out of the flood mitigation plan in response to Irma. So we had submitted that grant. $22.7 million is coming from DEP, and that required a 50-50 match, which the 50-50 match, or the 50% match for Lee County, was they credit us for the land purchase, so that worked out real well. Took a while to get all the permit or application documents in hand. It's now been approved by our board a couple weeks ago, so it's now back at DEP. Once they sign that off, they'll send it to us, and we will go out on the street and bring a consultant on board to go ahead and do the detailed design. As a side, this project is also being reviewed by a group of folks through a South Florida Water Management District initiative called the Corkscrew Watershed Initiative, and it involves Audubon Society, Crew Lands, Collier County, Lee County, City, Bonita Springs, Estero, Village of Estero, Big Cypress Basin. They're all looking at that whole region, not just the Flint Pen area, but also east to the Crew Lands, to look at the wetlands and what proper hydro period should be out there. So this is not entirely just a flood mitigation project. It's going to also serve for rehydration of wetlands that have been depleted over the years, as well as storing of water, recharging aquifer, and also providing water quality benefits. So it's a large regional project. Once we get that, we'll involve Parks and Rec in those design deliberations so that we can, dovetail on all the park amenities down the road. Any questions, I'll be glad to respond.
Well done. Good news.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions of Mr. Arlini on this item? Nice sum of funds. Very good. Thank you very much for that. The next item is an outline of the 2020 meeting dates. They are in your packet. Please take note of those. We typically meet on the third Wednesday of every month, so please put those in your calendar. Any comments or questions on the calendar for next year? Seeing none, we'll move on to item B2, which is Yellow Fever Creek, an update on what's going on between with the arrangement between the city of Cape Coral and Lee County relative to the Yellow Fever Creek Preserve. I believe Mr. Adlini and Mr. Clemens both might have some input on that. Who would like to update us on what the status of that might be?
Yeah, I just want to update you on what Cape Coral is proposing. The light shading up there is the city's property, and then below that, the darker shading is the 2020. The project, I guess, that's been in the news and what have you is this, they call it the Northeast Booster Station, and it's part of their expansion of the North 1 East Utility Extension Project for Cape Coral, and it's the very upper right-hand northeast corner of that, 14 acres. It's providing about over 100-foot, around 100-foot buffer from that community, and it's avoiding wetlands. It's something they said they've had in the works for a long time. It consists of, provide 10 million gallons of reclaimed water storage with a booster pumping facility and 5 million gallons of potable water storage with a booster pumping facility. Facility is going to be constructed in phases. The facility location layout is designed to avoid wetlands, existing conservation easements, and to maintain a vegetative buffer along Del Prado Boulevard to the north and the residential development to the east. So I do have a drawing of the facility, but as far as its impact to county-owned property, I'd rather the others address that, or if there is any issues with that.
Mr. Clemens, is that something you might enlighten us on?
Yes, there was an article in Fox News, and I think some other conversations that I was aware of. There were comments that the county owned this property, bought it with 2020 money, and conveyed it to the city. The city of Cape Coral bought this property in 1988 and 1991. So they acquired this property prior to the beginning of Conservation 2020. So the short answer there is there was no agreement between Conservation 2020 and the city on the purchase of this land. From the standpoint of impacts on the property, we have no cross agreements on this. And from county staff point, we recommend that the county not get involved in the city's business in this type of a project, because we do the same type of projects throughout the county. And it's difficult to find properties. No matter where you put these type of properties, there's going to be a certain segment of the population that doesn't want it where it's going.
So is your conclusion that, I believe based on your comments, that this does not negatively impact the preserve?
We see no evidence that this is affecting the preserve.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee of either Mr. Adolini or Mr. Clemens on regards to this particular item? If so, please.
The only thing I ask, and Robert, you can say, so the portion of ours, there's nothing I'm gathering going on this east side of the property that's going to run north, south, east, or west. It's going to run along Del Prado, coming back down. Whatever, like piping or any stuff that they're running.
They've not come to us for any infrastructure on the county property.
Okay.
There was a point in time where they were wanting to put some infrastructure adjacent to the road right of way and put it in 2020 property because of some construction design. And the comment that staff had with them is we prefer them to keep their infrastructure either in the right of way or anywhere except on Conservation 2020 property.
So if anything comes down on this southern part of our land, it's going to be in the right of way. It won't be anywhere near anything that revolves 2020.
To my knowledge, correct. And
Their site plan shows all the lines going out to Del Prado extension to that right of way, so that's.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff from the committee? Mr. Robin.
What is the interlocal agreement for interconnection to Yellow Fever Creek? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with that. There was, my understanding.
Yeah, we have a joint project we work with them on. If you look to the west of that piece, that big kidney-shaped pond there, that was a water management project that we were trying to pull water from Gator Slough and try to rehydrate Yellow Fever Creek to at least to try to regain some of the historic water flow in that area. So they've reconfigured some of their canal system and a pump station to deliver some water to the north and to that lake to provide some polishing. That in turn discharges to a branch of Yellow Creek there. One of the concerns we had with those residents is you see that pops out right there. They're adjacent right to Yellow Fever Creek, so we had to be concerned that we weren't going to overwhelm them with flood water either. But we're trying to basically rehydrate that creek during the dry season. So that's the interlocal agreement we have as far as that is concerned. So, but that's separate from that water facility feature that we just talked about.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. Our next agenda item is public comment. I have 2 cards. I'll call you up in the order in which it's received, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Kayla Gunther, please come forward.
Hi, my name is Kayla Gunther. I'm a resident of Lee County. I've lived here my whole life. I currently live sort of out by the airport at Daniels and 82. I saw in the recent LPA meeting that the airport has indicated that they don't want a 37-acre parcel. They call it the Timber Trails parcel. So this is basically at the end of my road, Shawnee Road. It's between us and the airport. And so at the very end of the airport property, the airport has said, we don't need this 37 acres. Next to this piece of property is other Conservation 2020 land. And so I'm here today just to ask you to think about this. The county already owns this parcel. I would like it to be set aside, added to that existing conservation land. I did have a conversation with the county, and they indicated they try to prioritize those types of parcels if they're already next to Conservation 2020 land to add those into there. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention today, since the Port Authority just said, hey, we don't need this 37 acres. There's no, from what I can tell, there's no other access to this parcel. It's not really something that somebody would benefit from developing. So I just wanted to put that on the record tonight.
Thank you for your comments.
If you want me to address it, I can.
If you would, please, just for informational purposes. Thank you.
I think I'm the one that spoke to you regarding this. Actually, I think it's about 200 acres. I had a conversation with the Port Authority after our phone call. About a year ago, I had a conversation with the Port Authority. They were looking at this property, trying to decide whether they need it or not because of some changes in whatever their requirements are, because they're guided by federal guidelines as opposed to, our guidelines. So I told them, I said, any property that you have adjacent to any county property, please let me know ahead of time, especially this. If they're looking to surplus, I said, I'd rather have a conversation before y'all go through that process. Let us take a look at it, nominate it. So I had a conversation with them immediately after we spoke. I sent them a kind of a timeline and process for Conservation 2020 activities, and informed them they would need to submit an application, and it would go through the process just like these that we looked at today. But it is something we're aware of. We've had conversation, and I had explained to them I think we would like to consider those properties before they do anything with them.
Thank you very much for that input. The next card I have is Barbara Manzo. Please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Barbara Manzo, representing Eyes on Conservation 2020 Coalition. Point of order, I asked to speak on 6A, and there's no comment while it's on staff items. Is that correct? Or how does that work?
That's correct.
Okay, so then,
You can speak now on it if you'd like.
is this one, since I wanted to speak twice?
3 minutes.
Okay, 6A, the grant, I'm glad to see that we're moving forward with something. My question, and I know you're not going to answer the question now, but my question is, how much of this property is being part of this grant for water management, opposed to the rest that's supposed to be used for public access and other Conservation 2020 items? And that land was purchased, 4,000 acres, in 2017, for those of you who don't remember. That was coming on 8 years ago, and we have not seen any plans for the rest of the use of this 4,000 acres. We have been asking for it, the Stero, our committee, and others. So we urge you to move forward on that. Second item I wanted to speak about was we've brought this to you before about revisiting the qualifications of what qualifies a parcel for purchase. And we'd like you to continue to look at that. We haven't had any action on that, and we're understanding that the county is looking at other parcels for restoration that would not otherwise qualify under Conservation 2020. And when I see parcels, I don't understand why the ones near Smokehouse Bay only got a score of 17. It's probably because of the trees that are on there and the restoration needed. But I think we're going to urge you again to please look at that and see what are the qualifications. We are losing out on lots of land simply because the parcels are not nominated. We don't go after them because under the regular situations, they would not qualify to even come forward as 2020. So we urge you to do that, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Would anyone else in the public care to speak? If so, please come forward at some. Holly?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I signed in, but I forgot to do the second piece of it. So just real quick, Holly Schwartz from the Eyes on Conservation 2020 Coalition. I wish Pete were still here because I wanted to ask staff if they knew, or they probably do, but on December 6th of this year, NOAA released some information on a transformational habitat restoration and coastal resilience grants to the tune of $100 million. And I have been in touch with the National Marine Fisheries for some other projects, and they pretty much said that Lee County is uniquely qualified for these types of grants because of storm recovery and all of the small to sawfish issues. So this is here for the taking, specifically on some 2020 properties that the county's been looking at in the past. So hopefully we can follow up with something like that. The other issue was, so a couple of years ago, we used to have a separate subcommittee. It was a management subcommittee, and that committee was disbanded because they basically promised that, because those issues would come back to the full committee anyway, but it was a time for the committee to really talk about in-depth management issues where we might have talked about things like the NOAA grant, but there's a couple of other things that I'm going to throw out there, and they're just questions that hopefully can be discussed later. And things like the saw palmetto, which we absolutely love the policy that the county's taken on that, and we thank you very much for that update last time. This one would be, so I would like to ask about an update, or if we could get an update on hurricane debris and where the hurricane debris is being stored on 2020 sites and what is the long-term recovery plan for that. Initially, we were told, we're only using 2020 sites because it's an absolute emergency and we have nowhere else to put this stuff. But unfortunately, now that we're seeing kind of a recurrence of storms in a succession year after year, are we going to continue to use 2020 sites and not be able to restore those properties? Because, once you dump all that stuff on there, you're basically, you introduce a seed source, you lose the opportunity for funding for management type grants like this. So that's a question. And the other thing I'd like to bring to the committee's attention is a very large mining operation. Troyer Brothers, 1,800 acres right between a 2020 property and a huge mitigation section. And, if we could work with that or maybe take a look at maybe monitoring wells, stuff like that. So.
Thank you very much. Just as information for the committee, recall at the last meeting in October, we had a presentation by the rangers about their efforts on the saw palmettos and all the things that they were doing to try to address that, which may be what you're referring to. And then every meeting, or most of the meetings recently, Mr. Young has been giving a very detailed presentation of all the management activities that have been undertaken by staff recently. Not each one 30 minutes each, but at least a good overview for us and the opportunity for us to ask questions. So that has been part of our regular agenda recently and will continue to be as part of our agenda as we go forward for the very reason you mentioned, so that we're able to inform not only the committee but also the public of the management activities that are taking place on the properties. Karen?
I just have one thing. They're using the same site that they used last time for all the storm debris, and they're bringing it over from Captiva on barges and putting it on Pine Island. And knowing we only have they did part of the road, but that bridge is going to take forever to get finished. They said 4 months, now it's going to be 8 months. And it's a nightmare. So I don't know how they're going to get that stuff off of there and like when. I mean, I know it's an impossible situation, but why is Pine Island always the dumping ground?
Thank you for that input. Good point. Perhaps based on some comments, certainly from Ms. Schwartz, the grant that might be available, I suspect that several folks on staff might already know about that. If not, they'll probably look into it. So thanks for bringing that to our attention. And then maybe some update on a future meeting on what is the status of the storage of debris on the 2020 properties.
Piles are huge.
Because I know we've been sensitive to that in the past, so it wouldn't be bad to learn a little bit about what's going on there. Very good. If you all would consider that to update us at the next meeting, that'd be wonderful. Any other comments from the committee, Mr. Sun?
Just a quick question, because I know we've had conversation around the rubric or the scoring metric before in just want to make sure I'm understanding this. There's no property that's presumed to have a low score that's not brought to us. Even if it's low scoring, it's brought to us to evaluate on its unique circumstances and allows us to say that despite it being a 17, with these improvements, this has value and so we can vote on it. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. We haven't closed the public comments yet. Ma'am, did you wish to speak? Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Sherry Wheaton Morris, and I'm a preserve user, and I just want to I thank everybody for what you're doing. Please keep up the good work. I also liked that there was a survey that came out. I don't know how many people responded, but I think that was great to ask people what they want on these preserves, and I'm hoping that, that some feedback came from that. But again, thank you for all you're doing. We have incredibly beautiful places. I've hiked all over the state, and right here are some of the most beautiful. So thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you for those comments. Would anyone else in the public care to speak? Please come forward. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. The next item is our next meeting is Wednesday, January 15th at 5:30, same location. Anyone care to make a motion for adjournment?
Make a motion to adjourn, Shane Spring.
Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Lincoln. We have a motion and a second.
Let me yell that again.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. And it carries unanimously. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful Christmas.